Hi everyone, this is Golden Buckets. Welcome to my channel. Please like, subscribe and comment in the video below. Okay, so in this video I will make another interesting comparison between two players that have been compared increasingly over the last few years, especially since Stephen Curry has won his fourth NBA championship in 2022. So before I delve into this comparison between Magic Johnson and Steph Curry, I would like to state that usually when I compare players, I'm less concerned about their raw accolades in terms of how many MVPs each player has won, how many Defensive Player of the Years a player has won, because I do not think that ranking players by accolades is often the best way to inform us on who between the two different players is the better player. And also, many things can drive the acquisition of accolades throughout history. You can think about Tim Duncan never having a Defensive Player of the Year, and you think about Ben Wallace having 4. And if we strictly talk about individual accolades, you might think that Ben Wallace was a better defensive player. So I do not want to utilize or over-rely on accolades when I compare players, but I rather talk about their game and what they did meaningful in the playoffs to inform us about who is the better basketball player between the two, who impacts winning at a higher degree, and who would the draft between the two players if I were a GM of a basketball franchise. And I do realize that oftentimes more than one opinion is valid. So I therefore accept someone having a different opinion, because oftentimes comparisons are made because two players are very close to each other, and one player might be better in a setting but less productive and less efficient in another one, or in a different system, in a different era. So oftentimes more than one answer is valid. Now to the comparison between Magic Johnson and Stephen Curry. I will first begin by examining their basketball profile, explain who they are as basketball players and how they do operate, what makes them effective, what makes them susceptible to great defensive schemes, and then I will delve into their career and in order to establish who I think I will draft between the two players. So in a comparison between basketball players, you will rarely come across two different types of players as Stephen Curry and Magic Johnson. I think there are more differences between Steph and Magic than there are between, let's say, LeBron and an MJ, for instance, a Tim Duncan or a KG, a Larry Bird, a Kevin Durant. So the comparison between Magic and Steph is, to say the least, very, very fascinating as well as peculiar, because very rarely two different players in terms of body size, skill sets, tendencies, overall play styles get compared like these two players. So let's examine their basketball profile for a second. So Magic Johnson is essentially a point guard, or we could also call him a point forward if we want. He's essentially a 6'8", 6'9" basketball player, primarily a transition player, someone whose main gift and his number one ability to impact the game is through his playmaking, basketball IQ, and decision making. So when you think about Magic Johnson, you often compare him more to the traditional mold of point guards like John Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, Jason Kidd, even though in some ways we could describe Magic as a unicorn for his time, since most point guards tend to be the shorter players on the basketball court. As I mentioned, some of the names before, Kidd, Stockton, Isaiah, tend to be closer to 6 foot in height, while Magic is a legit 6'8", 6'9", depending on the measurements or whether their players are measured barefoot or not. But Magic is a legit 6'8" player. So his height is that one of a small forward in most instances, not even a shooting guard, but a small forward. So Magic Johnson's body type is already the first thing that sets him apart from other point guards. He's much taller, and in basketball, size can be very, very impactful, because throughout NBA history, it is very rare that a player below 6'4" can impact the game to a high degree. And obviously Steph Curry, which will be compared later on, is the number one exception to this rule, that height does not define your impact on the basketball court. However, sticking with Magic Johnson is a 6'8", so he's already taller and generally more physically imposing than other point guards. Other point guards have to rely primarily on decision making, ball handling, ability to slice through the defense, to generate quality shots for their teammates. They handle the ball, they facilitate, and generate the offense primarily. Magic Johnson's role isn't too different. In fact, Magic epitomized what a point guard should be like. He's a player that, at his peak, averaged over 12 assists a game routinely. So Magic averaging a 10 assists per game season in his prime is something that would have been a rarity, to say the least, because Magic was a very prolific point guard. He wasn't a player like, let's say, LeBron in 2020, right? LeBron in that season played point guard primarily once the Lakers acquired AD. But LeBron, even in his best playmaking season, was nowhere as prolific as Magic was in his prime. Magic was not only a highly prolific point guard and playmaker and assist man, but he was also efficient at it, masterful, of course, but he was also qualitatively great. So why do I use the term qualitatively great? There are, oftentimes, the higher the number of assists doesn't necessarily mean that the playmaker is a god in terms of playmaking duties and ability to read defenses and set plays for his teammates. Isn't always the case. As you all know, Russell Westbrook was one of the leaders in assists for multiple seasons. The seasons where he averaged triple doubles. He oftentimes had close to 11 assists a game, which was quite a good number for today's NBA. But at no point we ever looked at Russell Westbrook as a top 5 passer, playmaker in the league, even though he had high assist numbers. Or even John Stockton. There are debates surrounding John Stockton that have come to the surface in later years. Some questioning the greatness of Stockton primarily due to his high assist numbers originating from one play where one of the most imposing scorers of all time, Karl Malone, was responsible for so much of the offense that led John Stockton to accumulate high number of assists to a much easier degree than playmakers like Jason Kidd, Nash, and Magic Johnson. But I will not delve into the Stockton debate now. So just to stay with Magic. So Magic was qualitatively the best point guard arguably ever in terms of the ability to play make at a high level, making the best reads, the best passes, and being effective at it. Oftentimes when I compare playmakers, I'm not concerned about the flashiness of their play style. Because oftentimes the best player on the basketball court is not the most flashy. I'd rather have a player who makes the right way and makes the right read than let's say a player who plays like the Globetrotters and is interested in flashiness, but his assists that do not lead to better offenses overall. So Magic Johnson was qualitatively the best playmaker in the world in his day and arguably of all time, but he was also quantitatively great. He not only was the best passer and playmaker, but he also capitalized on his strength in terms of assisting and setting the table for his whole team. And considering that offenses were not reliant on the three-point shot, Magic Johnson in his time largely accounted for at least almost 30 points out of playmaking without adding the points he scored as a player for his team. So Magic Johnson, due to his size, 6'8", even though he was not a freak athlete, he was still more athletic than other point guards like the Magic, the John Stockton, like the Isaiah and the Stocktons of the world. So, and the ability that Magic had as an offensive force, I would say, is his transition ability. Magic Johnson running the break, taking the ball coast to coast from his own basket to the basket of the other team to set his teammate for an open shot was the most terrifying offensive play in the league in the 1980s. Magic Johnson running the break for his teammates was the quintessential basketball move, the most efficient form of basketball in the 80s. And there's a reason why the Showtime Lakers are the greatest dynasty of the 80s. With Magic, they went to 9 NBA Finals and they won 5 titles. So this is to describe who Magic Johnson was as a player. In terms of his repertoire, I have to say that, by the way, Magic Johnson, due to his height and his great fundamentals, he was quite well-rounded in terms of the ability to score, pass, and the rebound. That's why he was one of the earliest players to be a force in the triple-double category, right? He has 138 triple-doubles in his career. He was a very good adept rebounder. As you all know, in the NBA Finals, as a rookie, he had 15 assists in the closing Game 6 against the Philadelphia 76ers. I would say, however, that even though his fundamentals were amazing, he was the best rebounder in the league at his position as a point guard. As I stated before, he was the best passer, quite also on target with his passes. He made few mistakes on the basketball court. And he was also good in terms of defense. He was good at anticipating passing lanes, gets a good number of steals and deflections, even though he wasn't a defensive player per se. And at times he was even a liability. So Magic's game was very well-rounded. He could affect and impact the game in a multitude of ways. That's one of his strengths as a basketball player. In a similar way to LeBron James or Nikola Jokic, I think that Magic was something similar in his own day. Obviously, he was much worse at certain categories, a little bit better at others, but Magic Johnson was a type of player, a player who could impact so much of the game without needing even to score a lot. In many of Magic's best games in his career, he often had just 16, 17, 18 points per game to go along with 20 assists. Magic wasn't someone who had to rely on his scoring ability to be effective and to be the best player on the court at any given time. And to conclude on Magic Johnson's basketball profile, obviously, this goes without saying, basketball IQ, one of the greatest, according to many, the best basketball IQ of all time, even though the Larry Bird comparison is a legitimate one, and you could make the case for Larry as well. But Magic Johnson was a basketball savant. I mean, the closest thing to it would have to be LeBron James, probably, in today's league. Magic Johnson basketball's IQ, intelligence, understanding of the game was next level. Something that most superstars in NBA history, no matter how great or gifted they are, whether the MJs, the Kobe's, the Stephs, they're not gifted with that. This is something very few players in NBA history are gifted with. And and now, as I talked about most of the strengths of Magic Johnson, let me also add the areas where he wasn't particularly strong. So when you think about Magic's game, there were two primary areas where he had weaknesses. So number one is defense, as I stated before. Magic was considered a below average defender, but given his size for his position, he could make up for it a little bit more. Also, given that in the 80s you had few players, perimeter players, who could create their own shot to the high degree of players today. So players today can pull up, can hit you with a wide variety of moves, like the Dames, the Kyries, the Steph, the Donovan Mitchell, the Devin Bookers, Luka, Harden. You have literally 50 players, at least in today's league, that are exceptional at creating offense, whether it is scoring or something else. So as a defender, Magic Johnson didn't have to deal with that. He didn't have to deal with being assigned to Damian Lillard or Kyrie Irving and having the responsibility to guard those players, primarily because in the 80s, you didn't have exceptional scoring guards, like point guards particularly, like the combo guards of today. So Magic Johnson, his potential defensive weaknesses and flaws could not be exposed because he played in an era where... So, as stated before, Magic Johnson didn't play in an era where his defensive limitations could be exploited in a playoff series. Number one, because there weren't a lot of great scoring options at the point guard positions. Now, I want to clarify that the 80s did feature a lot of amazing offensive players. The Larry Bird, George Gervin, Moses Malone, Bernard King, Dominic Wilkins. But the majority of the great offensive players in that era were primarily forwards, if not power forwards as well. And they primarily played in the posts rather than on the perimeter. So Magic Johnson was never assigned to great defensive players. He was usually the least gifted defensive player on his team, and usually it was Michael Cooper, James Worthy, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar that performed the defensive duties for the Showtime Lakers. Obviously, this isn't to say that Magic wasn't the best player on his team, because he was the engine that powered the Showtime Lakers offense. He was the number one reason for their success. But just for the sake of fairness in making this comparison, Magic Johnson was not a good defensive player, and even though we don't have the analytics measurements that are available today, I do not think that if we had them back then, they would portray Magic Johnson as a good defensive player. But as I stated before, Magic didn't play in an era where he was required by any means necessary to be a great defensive player, because as I stated before, the best offensive players in that era were primarily forwards, and they operated within the three-point line. So Magic Johnson could use his 6'8", 6'9" frame to sometimes be in the post and help with team defense, but he didn't have the responsibility to guard players like a Kyrie or a Dame one-on-one, like most point guards of today's era have to. And also the Lakers had personnel employed specifically to cover his weaknesses and to guard other teams' best players. Another area of Magic Johnson's game that wasn't as developed was his scoring game, let's say so. Because offensively, Magic is still arguably a top 5-6 player in NBA history when you account for his playmaking ability, his scoring. So what are his weaknesses as a scorer? I have to say, as a disclaimer, that I do prefer a player that is good at something, good at one area of scoring, but is more limited in terms of versatility than players who have all the moves in the world but are not proficient at any of those. Because in a playoff setting, when it comes to getting a bucket, Magic Johnson could get you a bucket, let's say, in the final 5 seconds of a game, much better than players who have all the moves in the world but are not effective enough to get you a bucket in that situation. And that's something I admire about Magic. Yes, his offensive repertoire was very limited. He was not a three-point shooter, even though he showed promise in the last couple of seasons in the league. He didn't have a jumper or a mid-range game. But the one thing that Magic had that came very useful for the Lakers, particularly down the stretch of games, was a baby hook shot in the post. So I'm sure that playing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for so many years definitely helped polish a little bit in the Magic's offensive game, since in practices he must have seen Curry in practice his hook shot. So as you'll know, there is the famous hook shot that Magic scores against the Lakers. I think that was the game winner to help them win the championship in the NBA Finals. And Magic Johnson, even though his game was limited in terms of variety, versatility, the ability to be a shooter, a jump shooter, I do believe what people understand about him is his ability to get to his spot and hit a player with a baby hook shot or a small floater. And that's the reason how Magic was able to sustain a good offensive production in terms of scoring, where he averaged nearly 18 to 22 a game in his prime. So Magic Johnson by no means was a superb scorer like Steph, like Dame, like Kobe, like MJ, like Larry Bird. But I do believe that in a team setting where you have other offensive options that could score for you, whether it's the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or the James Worthy, I do believe that his scoring output is quite valuable, because his ability to get you 20 anytime, simply by virtue of his size, his ability as a transition force to glide through the defenses, his ability to knock down the free throws when it's needed to, and his go-to move that baby hook shot that I mentioned earlier made him a very good scorer, at least for what the team built around him needed. So even though he was not Larry Bird as a scorer, he wasn't a bad scorer by any means. Okay, so now I have examined Magic Johnson's game. Now let me go to Steph Curry's game, and later on I will try to determine who will I choose if I were to draft one of these two players. So with Steph Curry, we have a completely different players, completely, in terms of size, build, strengths, tendencies, mentality. Steph Curry couldn't be more different than Magic. But the thing they have in common is they were the best player at their position by far in the league during their time. So let's go with Steph Curry for a second to examine his game. So Steph Curry is a combo guard. He's a combo guard by excellence. You know, he's the first among the many combo guards of his era. So when Steph Curry came to the scene, when comparisons were made about his game, I often described Steph Curry as a hybrid between two basketball players of previous eras, Steve Nash and Reggie Miller. I do believe that Steph Curry can be described in some ways as a hybrid between Nash and Reggie Miller. So, as I stated before, even though he's considered a point guard, combo guard more precisely, Steph Curry isn't really a point guard per se. You know, his game takes parts of other players' game to create something we have never seen before. He's in many ways a hybrid player, Steph. You know, the reason why I compare him to Nash is not necessarily the playmaking side, because as stated before, Nash was a quintessential point guard, a quintessential facilitator and playmaker for his team. So that is not the comparison I'm making between him and Nash. The reason why I compare them is because Nash was the originator of the modern day pace and space era. In the way offenses were operated in terms of his ability to be an efficient shooter. Something people don't give credit Nash for is that he's arguably, without a doubt, a top 10 shooter in NBA history. The only thing, he played in an era where volume of shots for point guards were very low. He couldn't take 10 threes, 12 threes a game, and therefore maximize his production and his ability on the basketball court. But Nash was one of the best shooters in NBA history as a 6 foot player. He was constantly in the 50-40-90 clubs, some seasons approaching the 50-45-90 club in the way that Steph did. And the comparison with Nash is there because Nash was a very short player, 6 foot tall, but his impact in the game was majestic. It was much bigger than what the statistics suggested. In his MVP seasons, it is true that he averaged 18 points, 10 assists, and at face value, his production doesn't seem that impressive, particularly compared to what LeBron, Dirk, and Kobe were averaging in those years. But Steve Nash was a trailblazer in terms of changing the way a short player could impact the basketball game to a higher degree than some of the league's best superstars. And his ability to shoot and his ability to blaze a trail into the pace and space era is what the most make him like Steph Curry. Then the other side of the comparison is Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller wasn't a point guard, wasn't a primarily ball handler, decision maker. Reggie Miller was a shooting guard, and this is one of the reasons why Steph Curry is often described not as a real point guard. But the people who make this claim that he's not a real point guard, they do not do it to disrespect Steph. They acknowledge his greatness. It is mostly to describe his play style is more similar to a shooting guard than a point guard, okay? So Steph Curry, like Reggie Miller, was first of all one of the 5 greatest shooters ever. In my opinion, arguably the greatest clutch shooter in NBA history. One of the best three-point shooters. He was efficient all across the board, even free throws and mid-range. But Reggie Miller epitomized the shooting guard, shoot-first tradition of players that players like Reggie Miller and Klay Thompson would later adopt or follow his path on that. So Reggie Miller is one of the shooting guards in NBA history, and Steph Curry took a lot out of his game. His ability to read defenses as a shooter, his ability to catch and shoot, his ability to move off the ball, and to place himself in a to move constantly. So to keep the defenses of other teams guessing, the ability to be unpredictable, the ability to keep the defense on their heels at all times, as well as to be impactful without the ball. Steph Curry took a big chunk out of his game, out of Reggie Miller, and Steph Curry, for this reason, as a combo guard, he implements some of the traits of a Steve Nash and of a Reggie Miller, giving birth, therefore, to totally different basketball players than what we have seen in previous eras. So Steph Curry is not a point guard per se, but he's not even a shooting guard per se, because unlike many shooting guards, Steph Curry operates, particularly shooting guards like the Reggie Millers, the Ray Allens, the Klay Thompsons, the Kyle Korvers. Steph Curry can operate on the ball extremely effectively, like the Kyries of the world. The only thing is that the Warrior system, to maximize the efficiency of the offense, they tend to assign the playmaking responsibilities to a Draymond Green, and in the past even to a Bogut a little bit as a passer out of the post. However, I would say that Steph Curry has the ability to be an effective on-ball player and to play more like a traditional point guard, like a Chris Paul, and initiate every pass, every decision for his teammates as a point guard. However, due to his incredible, remarkable skill set and the gravity, off-ball ability, his ability to move constantly and to tire defenders over the course of a game, the Golden State Warriors, and in my opinion, rightfully, they capitalized on his off-ball ability and therefore make Steph Curry play more like a shooting guard in that way, with Draymond operating as a point guard. So this is one of the reasons why Steph Curry is so remarkable historically, in a similar way to Magic, that Magic was this transcendent unicorn, being a 6'8" forward who played point guard and epitomized what a point guard became in terms of his skill set and abilities. The same way Steph Curry revolutionized the game because he doesn't fit in any of the molds of previous eras or of previous superstars. He's really a hybrid between two positions. He's both a point guard and a shooting guard for the Warriors. And when you assemble a 5-man lineup, what makes the Warriors so dangerous is that when you have Steph and Klay together in their prime, it was like having a point guard and two shooting guards on the floor with these two players, because Steph Curry can fill both roles, and therefore it's like having one extra player on the court at all times. So in many ways, this is something that Magic and Steph have in common. They're both transcended their positions by altering how their positions was played before them and how the mold of the point guard was before their time. But as I stated before, they're two totally different players. To continue with the Steph profile, Steph, as again, is his combo guard. So he who can play off the ball to an exceptional level. Some people have suggested that Steph Curry and Shaq are the two best off-ball players in NBA history, and it is hard to disagree with that assessment, given how they operate without needing or demanding the ball to a high degree, like many superstars. But then, what is very different, obviously, is their play style. Yes, as I stated before, Steph can play on the ball or off the ball, but Steph is not a playmaker first. What does it mean? The playmaking that Steph generates usually, given that he plays off the ball most of the time, is due to his gravity. So Steph Curry takes up a lot of space on the court, he grabs the attention of all the defenders, to the point that because of his gravity, his presence on the court, his movement, the attention he demands, the Warriors lead the league in open baskets in open field goals under the basket almost every year, because Draymond Green capitalizes on that to a high degree. And because all the attention of defenders is focused on Steph, the Warriors get so many buckets in playoff series out of that help them win games, help them extend the leads, help them really torture the defenses of other teams, because Steph Curry's gravity may be the best we have ever seen, particularly from a point guard player, and the Warriors' offense capitalizes on that to a high degree. So Steph Curry's playmaking ability is indirect in many ways. It is not Steph grabbing the ball, dishing out to teammates, diming teammates all over the court like Magic, Stockton, these type of players did. But he does it involuntarily, because the Warrior system operates in such a way that if all the defenses is focused on Steph, they do not want to force shots and give the ball to Steph to pass it to an open teammate that will take the shot. No, the Warriors' offense works in a way that they say they want to bait the defenses at all times. And this is one of the reasons why the Warriors have been so successful over the years. They say, you want to focus all of your attention on Steph? Great. Great. So we will get open cuts under the basket, because we will create plays for other teammates that do not involve Steph in that play. That is the magical nature of Steph's playmaking ability, which, as I stated before, is not the traditional playmaking ability of traditional point guards who dish out teammates. So what does Steph do actively? And what is his identity as a basketball player? Steph's identity as a basketball player is primarily as a score-first player. Steph is looking to score, and he's averaged over 30 or close to 30 on multiple occasions, regular season and playoffs. So Steph keeps defenses on their toes with his gravity and scoring ability. What Steph doesn't get respected enough for is that he has arguably been the best scorer in the league in terms of pure scoring ability. Steph oftentimes gets minimized or restricted to being just a great three-point shooter, while I do believe that many aspects of his game are quite underrated. Steph Curry rarely makes bad decisions or commits careless turnovers, has bad reads of the defenses. So Steph Curry, even though he's not Magic Johnson as a decision maker, I would still argue that he's been the best decision maker at his position in the league, arguably, for most of the late 2010s, early 2020s. So in my opinion, even as a decision maker, Steph Curry outshines some of his peers, like the Damian Lillards, the Kyrie Irvings, and player of that caliber. In my opinion, right now, probably, and this is recording this in 2023, in December, only Tyrese Haliburton and Luka Doncic, in my opinion, are better decision makers than Steph Curry. But just to say, even before the re-emergence of traditional point guards in the league with Tyrese Haliburton, Magic Johnson was still the best decision maker for so many years. So And talking about his scoring ability, as I was saying before, so Steph Curry is more than an exceptional three-point shooter. Steph Curry is arguably one of the best finishers as a point guard in the league. Years ago, when I made this remark that I did believe in 2015, 2014, 2016, 17, when there was a lot of hype surrounding Russell Westbrook. You know, his athletic displays of dunks, ferocious attacks at the rims, garnered a lot of popular attention. And I was saying back then that for as spectacular as Russell Westbrook's ability to take the rim and finish through contact is, he's less effective as a finisher than Steph Curry. Steph Curry may be unathletic, may make it look very simple. He's not like a electric, athletic finisher like Russell Westbrook, but his efficiency is very, very understated. Curry and Steph are way above everyone else in terms of finishing ability. That makes you question. Well, that it makes you question really how people view basketball if they want to rate Westbrook higher than Steph Curry as a basketball players. When one of Steph's many skills that isn't his best one, shooting obviously being his best skill, which is finishing, is on par with and better than a player like Russell Westbrook, whose primary game is based on finishing at the rim. So this makes you appreciate more what Steph Curry brings to the table in terms of impacting the game. Steph basketball IQ has grown over the years. I do believe in 2022 and 2023 we saw the peak version of Steph Curry as a playmaker, as a decision maker, as someone who can read defenses and impact the game with his IQ. I do believe that Steph is also slightly underrated as a rebounder for his size. I think in the 2017 NBA Finals, he almost averaged a triple-double. I think he had like 8 assists per game in the NBA Finals in 2017. But overall, I do believe that Steph's ability to rebound is slightly underrated. For some reason, it gets under-discussed. But I do believe he's a much better rebounder than given credit for. I would argue he's a better rebounder than Dame and Kyrie. I usually compare them to him because they have been the two best combo guards of his era besides him. So Steph's rebounding ability is underrated. And as a scorer overall, again, when people discuss the best scorers, they tend to lean towards players who have more moves, that are more versatile, like the Kevin Durant than Steph Curry. But I do believe that Steph Curry is a better scorer than Kevin Durant because he seems to be he seems to be more unfazed by better defensive coverages and better defenses played against him than KD is. We have seen in 2022, Kevin Durant was rendered more ineffective against the Boston Celtics, a team that really had no answer for Steph Curry in the finals. Steph Curry was completely tearing apart their defensive schemes like it was nothing. And those same players and coverages were giving a lot of trouble to Kevin Durant. So I do believe that Steph Curry's scoring ability is quite underrated because he led the league in scoring, I think, twice only. His primary offensive scoring weapon is a three-point shot. But I do believe that as a pure scorer, Steph is in the same class as arguably in the same class as Larry Bird, Kobe, and other players who are known as scorers in NBA history than what given credit for. So this is basically the profile of Steph Curry as a basketball player. He's a score-first player, but with an incredible level of balance between making the right play, scoring the ball, but without over-relying on it. Steph Curry has the ability to play in a system where he doesn't force shots, he doesn't take 40 shots a game like players like Harden or Westbrooks who play mostly for themselves rather than for the team. And this is something I admire about Steph. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of his weaknesses. First of all, before I do that, let me point out that on the leadership side, Steph and Magic are similar because they have the respect of their teammates. They are respected by the whole league, by the superstars on other teams. Their teammates respect what they do. So they're also two of the three best leaders in the game of their respective eras. This is another strength that is under discussed. You have many talented players in the league, for example, the Kawhi Leonards, the Kevin Durants, but their lack of leadership manifests itself quite often on the basketball court. Instead, with Steph, we rarely see that because Steph Curry has one of the best traits of a leader in the NBA today. So this is something that is a strength of his. Now, as I did for the Magic Johnson for the Magic Johnson section, I will discuss some of the weaknesses of Steph Curry. So Steph Curry, unlike Magic, is of a much smaller build and stature. He's 6'3" rather than 6'8", so he has a more limited physical impact on the game. And because of this, usually a player which of smaller build and size has a much harder time covering bigger players. And this is one of the weaknesses of Steph. He has never been a very good defensive player. But Steph Curry isn't the kind of player who simply doesn't try. Over the years, his effort has increased. We saw this in 2022 in the NBA Finals, where he competed on the defensive end. Was he able to shut down other offensive players? No. But he was able to compete and make up for some of his weaknesses and deficiencies as a defensive player by simply putting in effort to help his team win the games. So I would say Steph's biggest weaknesses is his defense. But this is not necessarily an effort issue with Steph. It's mostly a size limitation factor because Steph, not being the most powerful, explosive athlete, being quite small, he cannot stay in front of bigger defensive players. And this is one of the reasons why players like LeBron in the 2016 NBA Finals and in the 2023 Western Conference semifinals, they try to put Steph in as many pick and roll actions to exploit his defensive weaknesses since he cannot cover a bigger, stronger athlete like LeBron. So this is one of the deficiencies of Steph Curry. And in terms of major deficiencies, I have to say that is the only one. It is a deficiency that is based on his height and build, because had Steph been a little bit taller, even though he wouldn't have been a much better defensive player, it would have been much easier for him to contest other players' shots and to make a bigger impact on the game. But in terms of other weaknesses, I don't see any other. So this is a weakness that is common in both players, Magic and Steph. Obviously, Magic has a better physical attributes to potentially stay in front of other players better than Steph. But I would argue that Magic played in an era where he wasn't in the position to be exploited like modern day players are. If Magic played in today's era, he likely would have been targeted by the best offensive players in playoff settings, because there are so many players that will give him trouble due to his defensive limitations. So now that I've discussed both players, Magic Johnson and Steph Curry, and examined their basketball profile, now the question is, there are two questions. Number one, who I believe is greater, and number two, who I believe is better as a basketball player. So, and I will try to look at both sides of the debate, okay? So, Magic Johnson, in terms of who is greater before who is better, I do believe Magic Johnson, as of right now, is still the greater player, primarily because Magic Johnson was arguably, rather, more than arguably, he was without a doubt the greatest player of his era. So in the 80s, while I do believe that Larry Bird was a better basketball player than Magic, in terms of who is the greater player of the 80s, it's quite easily Magic Johnson, because he was more impactful overall, he accomplished more, and he won more. This is the main reasons why. Magic won more than Bird. He won 5 championships compared to Larry Bird's 3. He went to more NBA finals. He went to 8 NBA finals in the 80s, 9 overall. He was impactful from the beginning, his rookie season, winning the title and finals MVP, and so forth. So Magic Johnson had the distinction of being the greatest player of his era, the 1980s. While on the other hand, Steph Curry, even though you could argue that he gave LeBron problems in the finals, having a winning record against him and being 3-1 against him in the finals, it's still quite difficult to make an argument of having Steph over LeBron as the greatest player of their era. So even though he accomplished more in terms of team success, you also have to consider that the Warriors acquired Kevin Durant, and they stacked the deck to such a degree that it would have been impossible for LeBron to win the finals. So Steph Curry has the distinction of being the second greatest player of his era, while Magic was the greatest of his era. The other aspect is that makes Magic Johnson greater, in my opinion, overall than Steph Curry, is not only he was the greatest of his era, while Magic was the second greatest, but it's primarily to the trajectory of Steph's career. What do I mean by this? And so if you think about it, and this is trying to be as honest and fair as possible, okay? In 2015, when Steph Curry won the MVP, I do not believe that in 2015 alone, by itself, Steph was a top 5 player in the league in 2015, okay? He was certainly a top 10 player, but I do not believe he was that great already in 2015, his first MVP season, okay? That year, I don't believe that the Warriors beat the Cavs at full strength, okay? So I have a question mark about that, okay? And this is not to diminish Steph. As I stated, he's the second greatest player of his era behind LeBron, but I don't believe they win the championship, okay, if the Cavs are healthy. 2016 is where Steph takes a leap. And arguably, in the regular season, he becomes the best player in the league, even though LeBron will retake that title in the NBA Finals, outplaying Steph and winning the title for Cleveland, okay? Now, even though the Cavs won and made a historic championship run, coming back from 3-1, I want to give credit to Steph because I believe that Steph was injured and he was not at full strength in the playoffs. So while I don't give him that much credit, as big of a credit for being the best in 2015, since I believe he was not quite a top 5 player in the league, I do believe in 2016, you clearly see Steph being a top 2 player in the league, and unfortunately being a little bit banged up for the finals, where Bogut was hurt and Draymond deservedly got suspended. So I do not have much of an issue with 2016. But then what happens? When the Warriors acquire Kevin Durant, okay, and I am someone who, on the KD-Steph debate, I'm on the Steph side, because I believe Steph was a better player. The opposing team scouted more against Steph, schemed more against Steph than KD, and KD benefited a lot from Steph's gravity and attention. And that's one of the reasons why KD's efficiency went up in the 3 years he spent in Golden State. However, for the sake of fairness, I do believe there was a debate at the time on who was the better player. Most people even leaning towards KD. Were they misguided? I would say yes, arguably, but you cannot deny that there was a debate. There wasn't at no point a common agreement that Steph was number one and KD was number two on the team. And that's one of the reasons why KD won 2 finals MVP, even though Steph was arguably better in 2018 than KD in the finals. However, Magic Johnson, on the other hand, and so in 2017 and 2018, the Warriors dominate everyone. But there is this debate on who is better between Steph and KD. 2019, Steph played amazingly without KD in the playoffs, and they lose to a healthy Raptors team. Okay? So then what happens? Steph breaks his hand. For 2 years also they miss the playoffs. And in 2022, it's almost like the revenge season for Steph, because the Warriors are disrespected by the media. People say the dynasty is over. Steph will never win another title again. Steph is too many people at this time below Kevin Durant, who has just gone to the Brooklyn Nets. And Steph, what he does, he wins his best and most impressive championship to win his fourth title of the dynasty, and to put his name in conversations with the Magic Johnsons in NBA history. Now, I do believe that Steph's last championship is by far his best one and most impactful one. However, the only flaw I see is that, like 2015, where the Warriors obviously benefited from the injuries of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love in the finals, in 2022, I personally, people may disagree with me, I do not believe the Warriors beat the Nuggets at full strength, because Jamal Murray, in a similar vein to Kyrie Irving, has the ability to go toe-to-toe with any great guard in the league. And I do believe that Jamal Murray in the series would have matched Steph Curry's production. Obviously not outplayed him, because Steph is clearly the better basketball player between the two. But Jamal Murray, particularly benefiting from the gravity of Nikola Jokic, would have played quite close. Steph Curry, not as good, but quite close. And on the other hand, if all the attention is focused also on Jamal Murray, I do not believe the Warriors have an answer for Jokic, who in 3 out of 5 games in the gentleman's sweep, he played the Warriors to a standstill. You know, the depleted Nuggets without Murray, without Michael Porter Jr., were very close to go 3-0 in game 3, 4, and 5 of the gentleman's sweep by the Warriors. So I don't believe, honestly, that the Warriors beat a fully healthy Nuggets team in the first round. And if that is the case, okay, if you examine their career trajectory, you will see that in the 2 years where the Warriors were without Kevin Durant, okay, let me think. In the years the Warriors were without Kevin Durant, 1 year they win, 2015, when Steph Curry is not a top 4 or 5 player in the league and the Cavs are injured. 2016, I don't blame him. You know, the Warriors are a little bit banged up and they lose in the finals, but they nevertheless lost in the finals. 2021, with Steph healthy, they miss the playoffs. 2022, they win the championship, yes, but they faced an injured Nuggets team. 2023, they are so close to getting eliminated in the first round against the Sacramento Kings. Okay, if Sabonis was just a little bit better, I do believe the Warriors would have lost that series. Okay, so as you see, this quite a big sample size now. Steph Curry, even though he's a better player than, let's say, Kevin Durant, I do believe that we have seen that without Kevin Durant, he doesn't have the resume to compete with the Magic Johnson, really. Because Magic Johnson was arguably the second best player in only the first championship, the first year as a Laker. His rookie season, where he won Finals MVP, even though you could argue Kareem could have won that Finals MVP the first year, since he had a better performance across all 5 games of the NBA Finals. So Magic Johnson wasn't the best player in just his rookie season. But after that, you rarely had so many down years, or years where their team was lucky due to other teams' injuries. Yes, there was a year in 1988, I think, one of the years where they beat the Pistons, where Isaiah Thomas was hurt. But you could argue that the following year, when the Pistons won, the Lakers and Magic were hurt. So that championship evens out. So in my opinion, without Kevin Durant, Steph's legacy doesn't quite match up with the resume of Magic. And this isn't to discredit Steph, because I do believe he's exceptional and he's the second greatest player of his era. But Magic Johnson's resume was quite flawless, really, was quite unmatched. Only players like like Michael Jordan or Bill Russell have a legitimate claim to have a better resume than Magic Johnson. So based on my conclusion on their achievements, Magic Johnson clearly takes it as a greater player between the two. Now I will go to the last step of my comparison on who is a better basketball player. So I've examined their games. I've established that... So now that I've done a comparison of their games and basketball profile, and I've examined their accomplishments to determine who is greater, I will delve into who I think is a better basketball player, or rather, who would I draft if I were a GM. And but before I do this, I just want to devote a couple of minutes on the legacy question. In terms of legacy, which is tied to accomplishments, I want to give the edge to to Magic for one reason only. Steph Curry changed the game, and he has that card to play. That is a very good argument for him having a greater legacy in terms of changing the way the whole scope of the game of basketball is played, and how kids, young basketball players are trained, developed, and coached. So Steph Curry's impact on the game is bigger than that of Magic in terms of play style and everything. Where I think Magic takes it, however, is that you have to think about franchise impact. The Lakers are arguably I'm trying to make a comparison. They're like the biggest brand in basketball. They're like the Patriots for the football, Real Madrid for soccer. I'm trying to make a comparisons like the New York Mets for baseball. Like they're the biggest brand in basketball. And the reason why they're the biggest brand in basketball is not just because of all the talents they have acquired or drafted over the decades, from the Kobe's, the Shaq, the LeBron, the Kareem, but it's primarily due to Irving Magic Johnson. Because Magic Johnson turned a very good franchise that had players like Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Will Chamberlain, and even Kareem, who, by the way, missed the playoffs before he got there. He turned them into Showtime. He turned them into the brand of basketball, even to a bigger brand than the Boston Celtics. And in my opinion, the franchise impact that he had is legendary. And not only that, Magic Johnson really set the template for players like Michael Jordan to adopt. As you all know, basketball is a team game. Throughout NBA history, there have been amazing superstars, team players, like the Bill Russell, the Jerry West. But what made Magic unique is that after Dr. J, a few years earlier, of the Philadelphia 76er, Magic Johnson was really one of the first superstars in NBA history. So by superstar, I do not mean on the court as a basketball player. Magic Johnson was one of the first players to be a rock star, to be larger than life, to be like a Mike Tyson, a Muhammad Ali, a Martin Luther King. Like he became a popular person, like a pop figure, almost like a rock star. That every time Magic Johnson entered the room, you say, look, there's Magic Johnson. And all eyes are gazing him. He's like a celebrity. You could have a room full of legends, Kareem, Dr. J, Larry Bird, but if Magic Johnson is in the room, all eyes are focused on Magic. Now, it is true that this isn't a basketball take because it does not relate to how the game is played on the court. However, you have to acknowledge that Magic Johnson set the template for the superstars like the Michael Jordan, who later followed on his pathway. So Magic Johnson doesn't get enough credit for paving the way for superstars, for turning a good franchise into the #1 brand in all of basketball history, which is the LA Lakers. And third, obviously this is the most well-known notion, is for saving the league, really. Him and the Larry, the rivalry, the Celtics, the Lakers competition really saved the league. And not only saved the league from the dark ages of the 70s with drug addiction, problems, low revenue in the league, low viewership, but also by elevating the product. Magic and Bird ushered into the golden age of basketball, and they are the reason why the league not only exists today, but is a thriving business, is a thriving league where players make millions of dollars. So oftentimes people want to attribute all of these things to Michael Jordan in terms of being the first marketable superstar that paved the way for following generations of superstars, which is true to an extent, but I don't believe that Magic Johnson gets his due for how he revolutionized the league and made the league what it is today, so that players like the LeBron, the Kobe's, the Curry's benefited decades later. So influence, clearly, to me, overall, goes to Magic Johnson. Yes, Steph was more influential on the court, Steph Curry, but Magic Johnson's influence and impact is second to none. So, as I've discussed, Magic Johnson is greater than Steph Curry. The harder question is, who would I draft if I were a GM? Because if I were to draft, let's say for the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, I'm very likely drafting Magic Johnson over Steph Curry because his skill set and versatility, in my opinion, make him more valuable in more basketball eras. But if you're asking me to draft for the league today, I would have to go with Curry, because Curry is a master of the three-point line, who became the #1 weapon in the league, who affected and altered how the league is played, make him the better choice, in my opinion, in the past 15 years. 2010, 2015, 20, 25, I will draft Steph Curry over Magic Johnson for my franchise in the modern era, because in an era where you have millions of people training in shooting the three, having the best ever at it by a large margin, when you think about Steph's ability to shoot off the dribble, to shoot in any variety of way, and his ability to be a relentless scorer, his ability to, as I stated earlier in the video, all of his strengths, in my opinion, I will draft Steph Curry over Magic Johnson for today's era, for the modern eras. But if I were to draft for every other era from the 60s to the early 2000s, I will pick Magic Johnson, because Steph's strengths will be probably a little bit less valuable in terms of three-point shooting, um, but also because it is harder to scheme against Magic Johnson in an era that is more reliant on physicality rather than pure skills. So Steph Curry, I will pick Steph Curry in the modern era for my franchise, but in previous decades, I will draft Magic Johnson. So guys, let me know who do you think, so let me know in the comments. Number one, who do you think is the better basketball player? Strictly talking about abilities, talent, and ability to impact winning. Number two, who do you think is the greater basketball player in terms of everything, career, accomplishments, achievements, winning, championships, etc., competition faced? Number three, who would you draft for your franchise if you were a GM? Magic Johnson or Steph Curry? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Bye.